Just like the last time, the Lost Immortal Sutra's circulation increasingly slowed down. After some time, it was as if it was about to stop. At the instant the Lost Immortal Sutra came to a complete halt, Zhou Wen felt his body suddenly come to a halt, as though there was a crisp sound of a lock being turned. The last time, Zhou Wen had been rather slow to react and didn't have too strong a feeling. Now, after carefully sensing it, he realized that the ceasing of the aura circulation wasn't the only thing. His entire body had come to a halt and even his heart had skipped a beat. This pause only lasted for an instant. In the next second, Zhou Wen felt his primordial energy rapidly circulate. However, this circulation pathway was completely different from the Lost Immortal Sutra's energy. It also wasn't that of the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra, but a different primordial energy art that he had never cultivated before. This primordial energy art had a strange feeling of having his body fuse with the world itself. It was as though his entire being had become a part of the universe. His heart and the breathing of the universe was happening at the same frequency. Zhou Wen did not see a single word on the wordless monument, but he could sense the primordial energy art came from it. It was a very strange feeling that was indescribable. Wang Fei constantly observed her students to prevent any accidents happening from staring at the wordless monument. However, Wang Fei's attention was mostly focused on Zhou Wen. She wanted to see him change. She wanted to see him turn from a loser obsessed with gaming to a diligent genius. But soon, Wang Fei felt something amiss. The other students were all sweating profusely, trying their best to hold back their irascible emotions as they wore heavy or ferocious expressions. Even the extremely resolute students were frowning and looking as though they were struggling to cope. However, Zhou Wen was completely different. He naturally looked relaxed as he sat there languidly, as though he was sunbathing. It was as if he didn't feel any pressure. Could it be that Zhou Wen is so disheartened that even the unwinding monument's power can't help him? Wang Fei naturally didn't believe this. She only believed that Zhou Wen hadn't been exposed for long enough. As time passed, the expressions of the other students worsened. The students who had weaker self-restraint started to move around as if their bodies were crawling with worms. However, none of them stood up. They were the top students from every high school, so they naturally had their pride. None of them wanted to lose to their classmates, so they had to endure it. Li Xuan's condition was slightly better. One could tell that his will was extremely firm. He sat there motionless without any changes in expression. However, the sweat on his forehead indicated that he was not having an easy time. As for Zhou Wen, he was still languidly sitting beside Li Xuan. His expression hadn't changed from the beginning to the end. Furthermore, he appeared more and more relaxed. If not for Wang Fei's requirements for them to sit, he would likely be lying on the ground. Strange, how did this happen? Wang Fei was alarmed. She had also stared at the wordless monument before, so she naturally knew how powerful it was. Zhou Wen was only at the mortal stage, even epic experts would be influenced by the power of the wordless monument. It was absolutely impossible to be this relaxed. It has already been 10 minutes, but he hasn't reacted at all. Could it be? Wang Fei's heart skipped a beat when she thought of a possibility. Someone had previously guessed that there was a mysterious primordial energy art engraved on the wordless monument, but was invisible to everyone. If a candidate with a suitable physique placed their eyes on the wordless monument, perhaps it would reveal the primordial energy art on it. Could it be that Zhou Wen has a special physique that has an affinity with the art on the wordless monument? Wang Fei believed that the chances of that happening were extremely low, but Zhou Wen's present performance was somewhat odd. She planned on observing further. If Zhou Wen truly had a special physique that had an affinity with the wordless monument, she would have to reevaluate Zhou Wen's future achievements. If that's the case, Sis Lan has really picked up a treasure. She got a free son from her marriage, one who has a 1 in a billion special physique. That would be incredible. Wang Fei looked at Zhou Wen with mixed emotions as countless thoughts ran through her mind. Zhou Wen was feeling extremely relaxed. After completing one circulation, it was already enough for him to use it, just like the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra. At the same time, he felt that his body was filled with primordial energy. It was as though every breath he took could draw primordial energy from the world into his body. Although he couldn't make attempts, Zhou Wen felt that his primordial energy recovery was much faster than before. Now, he wished to switch on the game to see how his stats had changed. But in the present situation, it was inconvenient for him to take out his phone to game. All he could do was hold back his desire and continue staring at the wordless monument. After waiting for quite a while and seeing Zhou Wen maintain his languid expression with no special changes to the monument, Wang Fei began thinking about her previous idea. Could it be that Zhou Wen doesn't have a special physique, but that he's born with that expression? Wang Fei was puzzled as she looked at Zhou Wen's languid look. Half an hour quickly passed, but that was only for Zhou Wen. To the other students, half an hour felt like a century. When Wang Fei announced that the mission was over, all the classmates leapt up at the same time. Some were running at full speed, while others were exerting all their strength to strike out a set of moves. Some were constantly somersaulting. There were also some students who were quieter. Although they did not engage in any intense activity, they also circulated the primordial energy art they had cultivated and quickly circulated it again and again. As for some irascible fellows, they even used their primordial energy skills to deliver a barrage of fists on the mountain rocks. It was as if that was the only way they could vent their infinite energy. Li Xuan was an especially energetic fellow, but he didn't strike the rocks. Instead, he was sprawled on the ground doing push-ups as though he had an electric motor installed in him. Wang Fei was very satisfied with her student's performance. Although the power of the wordless monument was strange, as long as she used it well, it would be a great boon in educating them. However, when her gaze landed on Zhou Wen, her good mood immediately vanished. She saw Zhou Wen sitting on a rock beside the stone wall as he quickly took out his phone. He held the phone in his hands and was tapping away his fingers at a dazzling speed. Without looking at his phone screen, it was obvious that the fellow was playing a game. Article 102 of 1597. Zhou Wen secretly dripped a drop of blood on the phone screen. Although the blood-colored avatar was still alive, he still did the same thing. This was because this blood could represent his present physical condition. The blood-colored avatar condensed from the previous blood drop had stats of his previous self. Zhou Wen. Age 16 years. Lifeform level mortal. Strength 10. Speed 10. Constitution 11. Primordial energy 11. Primordial energy art Lost Immortal Sutra. Primordial energy skill Vigor Divine Fist Ashen Palm Blood Meditation Penetrating Pierce Dragon Gate Fairy skill. Companion Beast Truth Listener Silver Winged Flying Ant Mutated Lotus Flower Ant. My primordial energy has risen to 11. My primordial energy art is still Lost Immortal Sutra without any new primordial energy art appearing. Zhou Wen looked at his stats as countless thoughts ran through his mind. The game displayed Lost Immortal Sutra as his only primordial energy art. It meant that he had not mastered any others, but he could freely switch modes to the Small Perfection of Wisdom Sutra or the Wordless Monument's primordial energy art. It was truly fascinating. Seeing the other students desperately venting their energies without paying attention to him, Zhou Wen put away his phone and planned on walking around Mount Laojun to see if he could find the tiny palm symbol. Since he had mastered the Small Perfection of Wisdom Sutra the last time, he had obtained Truth Listener that was suspected to be a mythical creature. Perhaps, the Wordless Monument's primordial energy art had similar benefits too. Legend had it that no one could ascend Mount Laojun's golden peak, so perhaps there was an existence akin to the three-faced Buddha inside. Of course, Zhou Wen wasn't planning on walking straight to Golden Peak himself to verify his theory. All he wanted was to find the tiny palm symbol to download Mount Laojun's dungeon and try it out in-game. He had only taken a few steps when Wang Fei appeared in front of him. She stared at him and asked, "Where are you going?" No matter how she looked at it, Zhou Wen didn't look like he needed to vent his energy. He was still as languid as usual, but he looked much better than before. I have an inexhaustible amount of energy all over my body. I need to run to release it. Zhou Wen's insincere words were so obvious that they nearly made Wang Fei laugh out in exasperation. You want to run? Very good. Run 20 times from the foot of the mountain to the stone bridge in front of Golden Peak. I'll be here watching you. Not one round less, Wang Fei said angrily. Yes, Miss Wang. Zhou Wen didn't even try to defend himself. Keeping his arms close to his torso, he jogged upwards. The wordless monument was the boundary of Mount Laojun. Any further up allowed one to see true dimensional creatures. And from that point onwards, there would be animals from Earth that had mutated. Zhou Wen ran up the stone stairs and saw a white antelope standing by the edge of the cliff. It was eating from a blade of grass that grew out of the cliff. The antelope was snow-white in color with curved horns on its head that looked like carved white jade. It was obvious that it was not an antelope from Earth. On its forehead, there was a vertical eye that was half open. One could vaguely see a holy white light shimmering within. In between its four hooves there was a faint stream of white light swirling about, making it look as though it was walking on the light. Although Zhou Wen didn't know the level of the dimensional creature, he could tell that it was definitely extraordinary. The antelope also saw Zhou Wen, but it ignored him. It continued eating the grass on the mountain cliff. The grass grew among the rocks, its leaves withered and yellow. It did not look eye-catching, but the antelope was enjoying its meal as though it was delicious. Mount Laojun's dimensional creature didn't harm others, so Zhou Wen wasn't worried that the antelope would attack him. He approached it curiously and carefully observed the withered yellow grass growing from the cliff. The grass was split into 5 leaves. A leaf was only the length of a middle finger. It was yellow and withered as if it was about to die. But in the middle of the leaf, there was a white flower. It was about the size of a fingernail and looked as if it was carved from jade. The antelope bit down on the withered grass and flower and chewed repeatedly before swallowing them down. Its face was filled with bliss as though it was extremely satisfied. The antelope was only able to eat withered grass that was relatively close to the steep cliffs. Zhou Wen looked at the mountain cliff and saw that there wasn't much withered grass. An idea couldn't help but come to him. He leapt up and stepped on the mountain cliff with his toes, swirling around like a huge bird. It was none other than the Dragon Gate fairy skill he had just learned. He grabbed a withered yellow grass in midair and yanked at it forcefully, however, it remained motionless. With Zhou Wen's strength, he was surprisingly unable to pull the grass out. Zhou Wen held onto the grass with one hand while his body hung in midair. He turned his head and glanced at the antelope and saw that it had no intention of attacking him. As it chewed on the withered grass, it looked at Zhou Wen with a rather odd expression as though it was mocking him. Zhou Wen made 2 more attempts with all his strength, but the withered grass remained motionless. The leaf didn't show any signs of tearing. It was hard to imagine its tenacity. This withered grass is actually so tenacious. I'm afraid there's something odd about it. Zhou Wen had learned from textbooks that many dimensional zones had strange plants with various magical powers. Some plants could cause instant death from consuming them, while others could increase a human's physical fitness greatly by eating them. They could even break through and evolve to a different level. Since the three-eyed antelope was eating such withered grass, it meant that it wasn't poisonous. As for whether humans could eat it or not, Zhou Wen didn't know. Seeing that he couldn't pluck out the grass, Zhou Wen changed his mind and summoned the lotus flower ant's bracer. Pieces of bone that resembled lotus flower petals wrapped around Zhou Wen's left arm, forming the razor-like blades along his arm as his fingernails became as sharp as a blade. Raz came. Zhou Wen thrust his fingers forward as though he was cutting tofu and stabbed into the stone cliff. He hurriedly dug a few times and snapped the rocks around the grass and dug it out. Upon landing back on the stone stairs, Zhou Wen was unable to make head or tail. He had no choice but to put the grass back into his backpack. When he turned his head, he realized that the remaining withered grass had already been devoured by the three-eyed antelope. He was only curious at first, so he didn't think much of it as he continued running up the mountain. Mount Laojun was known as the safest dimensional zone, and as long as he didn't cross Golden Peak's gates, there wouldn't be any danger. Even if a human wanted to kill Zhou Wen, they typically wouldn't choose a place like Mount Laojun. Zhou Wen jogged as he surveyed his surroundings but failed to see any tiny palm symbol. As he ran, Zhou Wen suddenly felt his back tighten as though someone was pulling him from behind. He couldn't help but be alarmed as he hurriedly turned his head and saw the three-eyed antelope biting his backpack. Article 103 of 1597. Chapter 103 Revenge. Zhou Wen could tell that the three-eyed antelope wasn't using much force. Since its bite could chew through the tenacious withered grass, his backpack would have been torn to pieces if it exerted a little strength. It wouldn't remain in one piece as it was now. The antelope bit on the zipper in an attempt to unzip it. It most likely had its sights on the withered grass that Zhou Wen had dug up. Zhou Wen took off his backpack and carried it as he continued walking up the mountain with his back facing the three-eyed antelope. After all, Mount Laojun's dimensional creatures weren't violent, so he wasn't afraid it would do something to him. The antelope clearly wasn't giving up as it circled Zhou Wen and attempted to reach its head into his backpack. Zhou Wen could only constantly move his backpack around to dodge the antelope's head. Without trying, its speed was surprisingly fast. The moment Zhou Wen failed to focus, it had pulled open the zipper of his backpack. This three-eyed antelope is no ordinary mortal. If it wants to eat the withered grass so much, the grass must be extraordinary. With this in mind, Zhou Wen hurriedly hugged his backpack tightly and pressed down the hole. The three-eyed antelope didn't give up either. It buried its head deep into Zhou Wen's embrace, steeling its heart to eat the grass in his backpack. Although the three-eyed antelope didn't use brute force, its strength, speed, and reflexes were much better than Zhou Wen's. Unable to tussle against it, the three-eyed antelope was close to succeeding. Zhou Wen felt indignant, but ignoring how violence was not allowed on Mount Laojun, wouldn't have dared fight the antelope even if he could. The withered grass had already been revealed. Just as the antelope was about to bite onto it, Zhou Wen suddenly thought of something as he spat at it. Saliva sprayed onto the withered grass, covering its surface with spots of foamy saliva. The antelope, who already had its mouth open, was taken aback. It looked at the withered grass covered in saliva before looking at Zhou Wen, its expression extremely odd. "Do you still want it? I'm taking it away if you don't want to eat it." Zhou Wen spread open his backpack generously, but the antelope didn't react at all. All it did was look at the withered grass with a conflicted look. Seeing no response from it, Zhou Wen zipped up his backpack, slung it on his back, and ran up the mountain. The scenery of Mount Laojun was truly impressive. Unfortunately, Zhou Wen didn't see the palm symbol. Although the antelope didn't eat the withered grass, it didn't leave either. It slowly followed behind Zhou Wen without any intention of attacking him. He didn't know what it was up to. Mount Laojun wasn't very high, but after the dimensional storms, the space on the mountaintop seemed to be dilated. Despite the mountain looking short, Zhou Wen ran for quite some time before he gradually approached the mountaintop. From afar, he could see the scenery of the mountain peak. There were ancient buildings of various heights dotted on it. Although the buildings weren't majestic, they were built on the peak of the mountain with clouds clinging around them. They resembled the immortal residences as spoken of in myths. At the end of the stone stairs, there was a wooden structure that resembled a gateway. On it were the words Central Heaven Gateway. In front of the gateway was a stone statue, an elderly man riding on the back of a stone cow. His gaze was trained towards the firmaments, but the stone cow had its head turned towards the horizon. Zhou Wen had read the information on Mount Laojun before coming. He knew that the stone statue was likely the founder of Taoism, Li Er. Before the dimensional storms, although Mount Laojun was a scenic spot, it wasn't developed too well. This resulted in few tourists. Instead, it was common for locals to scale the mountain to see the sunrise over the sea of clouds from Golden Peak. From the information, the stone sculpture had been recently sculpted, so there was likely nothing odd about it. However, when Zhou Wen approached it, the mysterious phone vibrated. Zhou Wen hurriedly took out his mysterious phone and activated the camera function. Soon, he locked onto the stone cow's forehead. There was the familiar palm symbol. I've finally found it. Zhou Wen was overjoyed. Before coming to Mount Laojun, Wang Fei had repeatedly exhorted everyone not to cross Central Heaven Gateway. If they did, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. Zhou Wen wouldn't have dared venture deeper if he couldn't find the palm symbol. The phone screen showed that he had finished downloading the Mount Laojun dungeon. Just as Zhou Wen was reeling in delight, he suddenly felt a force slam into his back. He involuntarily flew up. The force was immense, making it impossible for Zhou Wen to control his strength. However, the force was extremely strange. Although it was heavy, it didn't injure Zhou Wen's muscles or bone. All he could do was fly involuntarily towards Central Heaven Gateway. In midair, Zhou Wen turned his head to take a glance, only to see that the three-eyed antelope was standing watching. It was giving him a nefarious smile. Holy shit. Wasn't it said that Mount Laojun's dimensional creatures are docile? To think that the three-eyed antelope holds such grudges, taking revenge in a blink of an eye. One really can't believe in rumors. Zhou Wen thought unhappily. He had always been wary of the three-eyed antelope, but he hadn't heard any sound before he was sent flying. Zhou Wen slammed through Central Heaven Gateway, and when he landed on the ground, he immediately bounced to his feet and attempted to rush out. However, he was taken aback when he looked back. He had clearly crossed the gateway with the word Central Heaven Gateway, but when he looked back, he realized that the gateway, along with the stone sculpture and stairs, were gone. He was by the side of a hanging cliff with clouds swirling around. Is this an illusion? Zhou Wen carefully headed to the edge of the cliff and looked down. A gust of the mountain wind blew and nearly blew him off the edge. Meh. A goat's cry sounded from nearby. Zhou Wen was alarmed as he hurriedly turned his head and saw the three-eyed antelope standing on a nearby boulder, looking at him mockingly. In this day and age, you can't even offend an antelope. Zhou Wen licked his lips and ignored it before glancing at his phone. He finally understood what was happening. The three-eyed antelope didn't dare harm him on the mountaintop, so it had struck him, throwing him onto Golden Peak, hoping to use its forces to finish him. Zhou Wen made up his mind not to head forward. He stood there and waited. Then, he used his phone to scout the way to see what oddities lay ahead on Golden Peak. There was no more downloading notice on the phone screen. On its home screen, there was an icon of a stone cow. On it were the words Mount Laojun. Zhou Wen was just about to click on the Mount Laojun icon when he felt something amiss. The hair follicles in his pores began to grow thicker and longer. They even sprouted leaves, turning him into a humanoid grass field. It left him alarmed. No good. Zhou Wen was alarmed as his mind raced. He instantly thought of the new primordial energy art he had learned from the wordless monument and quickly switched from the lost Immortal Sutra to it. Article 104 of 1597. The moment the wordless monument's primordial energy art was activated, the grass sprouting on Zhou Wen immediately stopped growing. Furthermore, it gradually began to recede. Soon, Zhou Wen's body returned to normal. The three-eyed antelope wore a look of surprise when it saw this. It stood nearby and sized up Zhou Wen. Thankfully, the primordial energy art of the wordless monument works. Zhou Wen heaved a long sigh of relief. He turned his head and saw that the area he came from remained a steep cliff and not the gateway he came from. Forget it. I'll find a way out in-game. Since there's the wordless monument's primordial energy art, there shouldn't be too much danger as long as that antelope doesn't find trouble with me. Zhou Wen's heart jumped for joy when he subconsciously looked at the antelope. The antelope who had been standing nearby just moments ago was nowhere to be seen. Meh. A bleat sounded from behind Zhou Wen, causing him to break out into a cold sweat. Turning his head, he indeed saw the antelope standing behind him, its eyes sizing him up. That was not all. As it sized him up, it circled around him as though he wanted to take in every inch of his body clearly, unwilling to miss out any detail. Zhou Wen didn't know what it was up to. He went on full alert, for he wasn't going to just sit back and do nothing if the antelope really wanted to harm him, even if he knew he was no match for it. However, it had no intention of taking action. It circled Zhou Wen a few times as the puzzlement in its eyes intensified. Brother Antelope, let's negotiate. I'll wash that blade of grass and return it to you. Why don't you live and let live? Zhou Wen carefully said to the three-eyed antelope. If he knew that the antelope would be so vengeful, he wouldn't have dug up the grass. The antelope ignored him as it moved closer and nudged him to walk inside with its head. The antelope had great strength, so much so that Zhou Wen felt that his strength couldn't put up any resistance. Being pushed by that force, he couldn't help but walk in. Countless thoughts flashed through Zhou Wen's mind, but he ultimately didn't risk his life by fighting with the antelope. The ancient buildings on top of Golden Peak were extremely large. They were connected by stone bridges. Beneath the stone bridges was a swirling sea of clouds, and walking over them made one feel like they were walking in the sky. Brother Antelope, where are you pushing me? Can't I walk on my own? Zhou Wen asked. The three-eyed antelope seemed to understand what he said and stopped nudging him with its head. It bleated at him before walking off. Zhou Wen knew that his speed and strength were inferior to that of the antelope, as it was likely an epic creature, so it wasn't realistic for him to escape under its nose. All he could do was follow it. The antelope led him through the ancient buildings, passing under many stone bridges before arriving at a Taoist temple. Zhou Wen focused his gaze and saw that the signboard had the words Great Pure Temple. Zhou Wen had a superficial knowledge of Taoism, but he didn't know that Great Pure One was one of the three Pure Ones: Jade Pure One, Supreme Pure One, and Great Pure One. Among them, the Great Pure One was the most famous, also known as Taishan Laojun. It was probably a name everyone in East District was aware of. This Taoist temple's name was Great Pure Temple, so it was definitely meant to consecrate Taishan Laojun. Don't tell me that Taishan Laojun is still living here. When Zhou Wen recalled his encounter at the small Buddha temple, he couldn't help but increase his circulation speed of the wordless monument's primordial energy art. The antelope came to the entrance of the Great Pure Temple but didn't enter. With a flash of its figure, it was already behind Zhou Wen and, before he even realized what was happening, it had pushed him into the temple. Zhou Wen was already mentally prepared, so he wasn't surprised. The antelope definitely wasn't taking him to sightsee when it led him here. Standing firm, Zhou Wen studied the situation within. Beyond the door was a compound that looked rather old. The ground was covered in dust and fallen leaves. It was as though no one had stepped foot into it for 1,000 years. In fact, what Zhou Wen knew was that before the dimensional storms, Great Pure Temple enjoyed plenty of incense offerings. And that was only decades ago. Since you are a disciple of my Taoist school, you can choose any of the 3 pure talismans on the table. An ancient voice rang out from an unknown location, resounding inside Great Pure Temple as though it came from every direction. It was impossible to tell where the source came from. Yes, master. Zhou Wen didn't dare hesitate. After bowing, his gaze landed on an offering table in the yard. After he passed through the door, he saw 3 talismans on the offering table. They looked completely different in material. One was like flawless white jade, while the second was made of metal, and the last one was carved from wood. The 3 talismans were the size of a palm with similar appearances. However, the runic patterns on them were different. Zhou Wen couldn't read the runes since he had a limited understanding of Taoism. He could only make half-baked guesses. Small Buddha Temple's 3-faced Buddha made me choose a mythical companion egg, but I'm made to choose talismans here. I wonder which one is useful. This is Great Pure Temple, so logically speaking, the 3 talismans should be related to Taishan Laojun. However, that might not be the case. Taoism's 3 pure ones were one embodiment to begin with, so the 3 talismans might represent the 3 pure ones. If my guess is correct, then the Jade Talisman represents the Jade Pure One, Lord of Primordial Beginning. The Wooden Talisman has something to do with nature, so it likely represents Taishan Laojun. As for the Golden Talisman, it should represent the Supreme Pure One. Which one should I choose? Zhou Wen was just making random guesses, so it wasn't as though he knew if he was correct. However, from an aesthetic point of view, he would have taken the Jade Talisman. But upon realizing that he was at Great Pure Temple, he hesitated for a moment before taking the Wooden Talisman. The instant Zhou Wen picked up the Wooden Talisman, he saw the projection in front of him transform. Like a dream, Great Pure Temple dissipated. When Zhou Wen's vision returned to normal, he realized that he had already returned to the spot beside the stone sculpture of an elderly man riding on the back of a cow. If it wasn't for the wooden charm in his hand, Zhou Wen would have wondered if he had been dreaming. Meh. A bleat sounded. Upon seeing the 3-eyed antelope, Zhou Wen confirmed everything that had happened was no illusion. He didn't dare stay here any longer. Although Mount Laojun's golden peak wasn't as strange as small Buddha Temple, it left Zhou Wen apprehensive as he ran down the mountain with the wooden talisman in hand. When he reached the halfway point and saw Wang Fei and his classmates, Zhou Wen heaved a sigh of relief. Zhou Wen, I told you to run. Were you off merrymaking? Why did you bring an antelope back? Wang Fei frowned when she saw Zhou Wen. He turned his head and saw that the 3-eyed antelope had followed him down. However, the vertical eye on its forehead had vanished. Apart from its whiteness, it looked no different from an ordinary white antelope. Wang Fei originally imagined that it was an earth animal that had mutated on Mount Laojun, not expecting it to be a dimensional creature. After all, dimensional creatures weren't able to step past the wordless monument. Article 105 of 1597. Chapter 105 The Antelope That Just Won't Leave. At the Special Investigation Bureau's dedicated hospital. Liz, answer me honestly. Is there anything you exaggerated in the report you submitted? Qiao Sichuan asked with a grave expression. Minister, I've been strictly trained in intelligence. I know the importance of correct intelligence. I can guarantee that the report I wrote has no exaggerations or falsehoods. I can be responsible for every word in it. Liz struggled to get up as she was pushed down by Qiao Sichuan. You have just received treatment. Only by recuperating and being able to move can you have what it takes to continue fighting. Qiao Sichuan placated Liz and flipped through her report. I have already done thorough investigations and have confirmed that there's a mysterious stone tablet in small Buddha Temple. It's like the other lands of mystery. No one can master the primordial energy art on the stone monument unless that person possesses the special physique that matches it. In that case, that Zhou Wen, the mere thought of Zhou Wen made Liz immediately clench her teeth. If it weren't for Zhou Wen, she wouldn't have been injured, much less have her sea of energy destroyed. Qiao Sichuan nodded slightly. According to your report, he was able to enter the temple hall without being harmed. As for you, you had Headless Angel to protect you, yet you were nearly killed. This means there are only two possibilities. First, it's that he has a guardian companion beast that's stronger than Headless Angel, protecting him from harm. The other possibility is that he possesses a special physique that matches Small Buddha Temple, preventing him from being attacked. I'm inclined towards the latter. Liz said hatefully. The Yin family must have known that Zhou Wen had a special physique. That's why they view him in a different light and gave him in Jing's candidacy at all costs. If by a stroke of luck, he has obtained another special physique, having two talents on him, it won't be impossible for him to have a chance to break through to the mythical realm. The Yin family has really made their plans. I think Ouyang Lan and Zhou Lingfeng's marriage was probably just a transaction. At the thought of the Yin family, Liz also gritted her teeth in hatred. She was the daughter of a senator after all, yet in Tianzuo had her sea of energy crippled. She had to have her revenge. Qiao Sichuan said plainly, the impact dimensional zones have in various parts of the world is growing more obvious. It results in the barriers between territories growing, therefore impeding movement. The factions from these territories have always been trying to use this opportunity to extricate themselves from the League's control. The Yin family is filled with ambition, and they have a primordial gold mine while they have been nurturing their army. They are also using all kinds of means to seek out a way to break through to the mythical stage. Their ambition knows no bounds. Minister, we can't let the Yin family continue. We have to nip Zhou Wen in the bud. As long as the Yin family doesn't have a mythical expert, they will have scruples and won't easily betray and abandon the League, Liz said excitedly. Calm down. You haven't recovered from your injuries. After placating Liz's emotions, Qiao Sichuan continued, let's not talk about whether Zhou Wen was intentionally nurtured by the Yin family, just the fact that he has a special physique implies he needs to come under the League's service. He cannot become a private tool of the Yin family. However, Luong is ultimately the Yin family's territory. After what happened the previous time, they will definitely enhance their protection of him. It's probably impossible to touch him in Luong. Are we just going to watch the Yin family do whatever they want? Liz said angrily. Of course not. However, everything depends on the ways and methods employed. The League needs the Yin family's supply of primordial gold, or so we can't touch them for now. However, since Zhou Wen obtained a nomination, he will definitely be sent to our League's holy grounds and lose the protection of the Yin family. From there, it will be a lot easier for us to bring him back, Qiao Sichuan said indifferently. We let him off. He can live for a few more days, Liz said hatefully. Qiao Sichuan exhorted again. For now, don't tell anyone about Zhou Wen's special physique. It's best if there aren't any external complications. Minister, don't worry. I understand what needs to be done. Liz nodded slightly. Having a special physique had wide implications. Even in the Senate, there were different voices. The various factions also treated special physiques seriously. If other factions knew that Zhou Wen possessed a special physique, it would likely be impossible for them to control the situation's development, something Liz and Qiao Sichuan least wanted to happen. Qiao Sichuan was thinking about work, but Liz only wanted to finish off Zhou Wen personally. In the Four Seasons garden dorms, Zhou Wen sat on a chair and stared at the white antelope. This antelope had been following him ever since he returned from Mount Laojun. It even squeezed into the college bus and returned to the college with him. Zhou Wen really wished to chase the creature away, but he knew how terrifying the antelope was. If he forcefully chased it away, it was possible that it would explode with rage and slaughter someone. When that happened, not only would it affect Zhou Wen, even his fellow classmates and teacher would be down on their luck. Therefore, even though Zhou Wen wished to chase away the antelope, he didn't forcefully drive it away. Thankfully, it was normal for students to use companion beasts at Sunset College, so it wasn't too shocking for Zhou Wen to bring one back. However, Li Xuan and the other students didn't cease mocking him on the way back. I say, Zhou Wen, your luck is pretty good. A pet automatically recognizes you as its owner. Unfortunately, this is only an antelope that mutated on Mount Laojun and not a high-level dimensional creature. If this fellow was an epic dimensional creature, that would be awesome. It's really a pity. Back when Li Xuan said those words, it was naturally a jibe at Zhou Wen. However, Zhou Wen knew very well that the fellow definitely had powers at the epic stage. Brother Antelope, I've washed your grass. Eat it with ease. I've used green, natural, uncontaminated cleaning fluid to wash it more than 10 times. It's clean. Quickly finish it and go on your merry way. A place like school has too much dust and the pollution is terrible. There are all kinds of people here and there's all kinds of noise pollution. It's nothing comparable to a place like Mount Laojun. It must be hard on you living here. It's best you return. Zhou Wen placed the withered grass on the table in front of the antelope as he persuaded it sincerely. Glancing at the withered grass on the table, it didn't even sniff it but turned around and walked to the couch. It then lay on the couch and squinted its eyes comfortably. Brother Antelope, although you are indeed impressive, you should know that this is Sunset College. Many epic experts are stationed here. If they discover that you are a feral dimensional creature, I'm afraid, Zhou Wen had planned on reasoning with it when he realized that emotional appeal didn't work. To his surprise, the antelope had fallen asleep on the couch as though it hadn't heard Zhou Wen at all. Article 106 of 1597.